Questions to An Taoiseach? Okay.
The Interdepartmental Working Group on Regulating Sponsorship by Alcohol Companies of Major Sporting Events was established as part of a package of measures to address alcohol misuse agreed by Government in late 2013. In the case of sports sponsorship by alcohol companies, the Government acknowledged the public health concerns associated with alcohol sponsorship of sport, but also the potential impact of any regulation on funding for sport, and established the working group to consider the value, the evidence, the feasibility and the implications of regulating sponsorship of major sporting events. The working group was chaired by the Department of the Taoiseach and had representatives from the Department of Health, Public Expenditure and Reform, Finance, Social Protection, Transport, Tourism and Sport, Arts, Heritage and the Gaeltacht, Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Children and Youth Affairs, Education and Skills who served on that working group. The working group held a public consultation process seeking relevant information from interested parties. 19 submissions were received in response to this request, and these are all available on the Department website of the Department of the Taoiseach. The working group finalised its report in December, and it has been considered by the Cabinet Committee on Social Policy and Public Service Reform. That report is also available on my department's website. Arising from consideration by the Cabinet Committee, the Minister for Health finalised proposals on the bill in conjunction with his ministerial colleagues and brought these to Government last week. The Government gave approval for the drafting of a public health alcohol bill, and the Minister for Health has published the general scheme of the bill. Any questions on the Government's proposal can be referred to the Minister for Health. I also anticipate that the relevant Oireachtas Committee will have an opportunity to consider the general scheme that he has published as part of the pre-legislative scrutiny process, which, as you know, is another element of the whole reform in Creighton.
Creighton.
I don't wish to make a lengthy speech. I simply would like to ask the Taoiseach a very simple, succinct question, and that is, Taoiseach, on what moral or ethical basis do you believe it is appropriate that we impose a ban on tobacco sponsorship of sport in this country, yet we have failed to grasp the opportunity, you have failed to grasp the opportunity to impose a similar ban on alcohol sponsorship, given that alcohol causes far more damage to individuals and to families up and down right across this state?
Well, I don't accept the Deputy's assertion at all. This was given very careful consideration, and clearly the question of marketing and advertising is an inherent part of sponsorship. And the Government and the working group looked very carefully at this with the 19 submissions that were made, and there will be serious regulation of both the marketing and the advertising, which has an impact on young people and those vulnerable to excessive drinking in particular. I'd make the point to the Deputy that access and affordability are the two key issues that every group has pointed out make an impact on young people in particular in respect of drink and the consequences of continuous over-drinking. So under the proposed legislation, the Minister will be entitled to introduce restrictive practices for particular marketing practices to ensure that alcohol products are not produced, designed or prompted to appeal to children. So on those grounds, the difference between drink and tobacco is quite clear. Marketing and advertising are an inherent part of sponsorship, and for that reason the Minister published the general scheme of the bill, which will regulate and put in place those issues of marketing and advertising which might impact directly upon younger people, and with particular reference to children.
Taoiseach, you say you don't accept my assertion. Do you accept that the Government's Steering Group on National Substance Misuse in September 2012 found that a quarter of Irish adults binge drink every week, that the average Irish person drinks the equivalent of 482 pints of lager 125 bottles of wine or 45 bottles of vodka every year? Do you accept that 1.5 million Irish adults are drinking in a way that's harmful to their health? And do you accept that over 50% of 16-year-olds have been drunk? That 1 in 5 16-year-olds drinks on a regular weekly basis? I find it extraordinary that you do not see the correlation between advertising, the most lucrative, the most targeted, the most effective form of advertising is to link a product to sport. Sport is sexy, so sport is something that everybody in society is, or the vast majority, particularly of young people, are interested in. That's why the alcohol companies sponsor these major sporting events, and it's why in the past Benson and Hedges sponsored cricket, Embassy sponsored darts, Winston and Camel sponsored the FIFA World Cup. It's why Silkcut sponsored the Rugby League. It's why Regal and Winfield also sponsored rugby. It's why motorsports were sponsored by Imperial, by Rizla, and so on and so forth. And in this state, Carroll's, Benson and Hedges, all of the familiar cigarette companies that we're all aware of sponsored almost all of the major sporting events until the ban was introduced and that sponsorship was phased out. And there was no difficulty, Taoiseach, in finding alternative sources of sponsorship funding. And I have no doubt in my mind that the vast numbers of foreign companies that are investing in Ireland, the Googles, all of the tech companies, would love the opportunity to be associated with major sporting events in this country. I cannot understand why the government, which made such strong noises about this subject earlier in its lifetime, why it has caved into vested interests essentially. €20 million is the gap. €20 million in alcohol sponsorship in this state in a range of sporting sector, a range of sports. Why can you not see beyond the short term? Why can you not at least agree to a phasing in of this? I just don't understand it. It is illogical. It has worked with tobacco. It is effective. It is reducing, along with other measures, granted, it is reducing the number of young people who are taking up smoking. And as somebody who used to be quite a heavy smoker, I think that's an extremely positive step. But the problem, Taoiseach, is that we have a huge number of mental health issues, an unacceptable level of suicide, which is directly linked to alcohol consumption in many, many cases, particularly with young men. And yet, the government is burying its head in the sand, seems to be unconcerned, seems to have very little concern about trying to address it. And finally, if I may say to Ceann Comhairle, I'd ask the Taoiseach, does he agree with his fellow countyman, former GAA President Mick Loftus, who said, as a doctor and former coroner, I know firsthand the damage alcohol does. 88 people a month die in this country due to alcohol-related reasons. If that number of people were dying in any other way, they'd be taking all sorts of action to try and stop it, but instead they are promoting it. That is the stark reality. And Taoiseach, I would urge you to listen to the expert medical advice of your fellow countyman, who also happens to be, obviously, a very prominent figure in sporting circles and especially in the GAA.
Taoiseach.
Well, Deputy Creighton, you failed to address two fundamental issues in your question. These are two things that are accepted by everybody: availability and affordability. Now, you've seen them yourself in so many locations around the country, pallets of beer and cheap beers in every small shop around the place. Availability and affordability are the key determinants of access to drink and abuse of drink, particularly among vulnerable and younger people. I don't accept.
Sorry, please, no, please.
I don't accept at all.
No, resume your seat, Deputy. You
made no point about that.
This is not the question I asked.
No, please resume. Taoiseach is entitled to.
In replying to your.
Sorry, please resume your seat.
In replying to your question.
Deputy, would you please resume your seat? Thank you.
I'm entitled to reply to your question by pointing out what you failed to address in your question. The two key determinants. And that's why minimum unit pricing will be brought in, and that's why segregation and separation within commercial outlets will be brought in. That's why there will be proper regulation of the advertising and the marketing where sponsorship is involved. Now, the Irish cricket team are in India. And they failed to get sponsorship from any of the companies that you mentioned, who are not associated either with drink or tobacco. The Irish Open, for the last number of years, has had to be funded by the taxpayer through Fáilte Ireland, where there was no take-up from commercial companies that one might say, well, it would be easy to sponsor something like that. Yes, it is true to say, that there are serious mental health issues around in the country. That's why there have been ring-fence monies made available for the last number of years by the government. That's why there's more help available than ever before. That's why for young people in particular, they're advised to talk about these things, to open up, to discuss and to connect with their peers. I don't accept from you that government have caved in here to vested interests at all. This matter has been discussed in here for 6 years now, and nobody has done anything about it. In this case, the government have acted now decisively. Everybody will have their opportunity to say their piece during the course of the discussion on the bill now being drafted by the Minister.